The stock market is down about 2.5% today, and Bitcoin is up about 2.5% today. That is a really big deal. The reason that is a big deal is historically, Bitcoin and the stock market have generally correlated a good bit. And the reason for that is whether sentiment is up or down for what's called risk assets. Risk assets are things that people perceive to be high value and therefore high risk, or I should say high potential growth and therefore high risk, because the two always go together. And so often the two will move together. Well, people like me, all Bitcoiners, have been waiting for a decoupling of Bitcoin and the stock market. And what that indicates is that people are buying Bitcoin instead of buying stocks because they understand that Bitcoin is a great, yeah, it has all the economic upside without the risks of owning individual stocks. So, in a world today where the stock market in total in the United States lost more than $1 trillion of value, Bitcoin went up. So normally that would not be the case. Normally the stock market would, puke all over the place like it did today. And Bitcoin would go down because everybody's scared, everybody's panicking, everybody is selling everything. And when everybody's selling everything, Bitcoin isn't everything. It is something that they can sell when they're freaking out. But starting last night, which was Sunday night, Easter Sunday evening, starting Sunday night, as it became clear that there was not going to be a deal between Japan and the United States on tariffs, and as the trade war with China escalates, and for the record, I think trade wars are stupid. They are counterproductive. They hurt everyone, and they are bad economic policy. So I am anti-tariff. I am anti-trade war, and I am anti anything that keeps voluntary people from trading with each other, regardless of whether they're in the United States or abroad. But anyway, it is what it is. So here we are. We're in the middle of a trade war, and there's massive tariffs on China, and 10% tariffs on everybody, and it's causing economic chaos in the United States. Well, again, the big question, and a big part of the reason that I moved from 99% of my liquid assets in Bitcoin up to 100% of my liquid assets in Bitcoin was because we started to see this decoupling a few weeks ago. For the first time a few weeks ago, you started to see the stock market go down when Bitcoin was going up. Or I should say, Bitcoin go up when the stock market was going down. And what that indicated to me was that people were starting to understand that in a world of chaos, where people are making insane decisions and dumb stuff is happening, that buying Bitcoin is a great way to insulate yourself from the economic mismanagement of humans, regardless of who's doing it. And I would argue there was massive amounts of economic mismanagement under all of the recent presidents going, back to and before Ronald Reagan. So humans are fallible, they make mistakes, they do dumb things, and we all have to live with it. The good news is you don't have to live with it. You can opt out of the insanity by buying Bitcoin, and more people are doing that. The only reason the stock market in the United States was down more than $1 trillion today was because people were demanding U.S. stocks less. They wanted less U.S. stocks, and therefore U.S. stocks went down in value. So why did Bitcoin go up 2.5% today? Because people demanded Bitcoin more than the demand was higher than the supply of Bitcoin today. Therefore, the price went up, and the price right now is above $87,000 per coin after chilling quite a while in the $85,000 range and dipping very temporarily into the 70,000s for a short period of time, which is when I bought the last 1% of my liquid assets that was not already in Bitcoin. I bought Bitcoin with when Bitcoin dipped into the 70,000s. For the quick historical record, I was at 97% of my liquid assets that I own or control in Bitcoin. And then when Bitcoin dropped into 80,000s, I moved from 97% to 99%. And then when Bitcoin dropped into the 70,000s, I put the last 1% that was in stocks or bonds or anything other than Bitcoin. I moved that over to Bitcoin. So I feel great about having 100% of my liquid assets that I own or control in Bitcoin. Rachel still does have a emergency fund that I have no legal right to and no access to. And so if, somehow my Bitcoin conviction ends up being wrong, which I am certain is not the case, I spend probably between 2 hours and 3 hours every single day researching every single facet of Bitcoin and the stock market and what nation states are doing and Bitcoin adoption worldwide. I spend probably between 2 hours and 3 hours a day making sure I am not wrong about Bitcoin. So after years and years and years of spending 2 to 3 hours a day making sure I'm not wrong about Bitcoin, I am just pretty dang sure I'm not wrong about Bitcoin. And that conviction level is obviously at 100% because otherwise I would not have 100% of my liquid assets that I own or control in Bitcoin. But again, that does not count the emergency reserve funds that only Rachel controls and manages, which is make sure if I'm somehow wrong, we still have food to eat. And obviously, I'm still the president of Prospera, and that has an accompanying income as well. Although that income right now is instantly converted into Bitcoin. So even my Prospera income is instantly used to buy Bitcoin every time a payroll happens. So anyway, so here we are. I feel great about 100% of my liquid assets in Bitcoin. Bitcoin appears to be more and more decoupling from the stock market, which means it moves based on its own value rather than just going up and down with the stock market. And historically, even though the two have been correlated, Bitcoin has gone up a lot more than the stock market, which is why Bitcoin's been the best performing asset in, the world of major asset classes over the last 10 years. Is because even though they tend to go up and down together, when they go up together, Bitcoin tends to go way more up than the stock market. So maybe the stock market goes up 2%, Bitcoin goes up 10%. And obviously you do that long enough, you end up with, Bitcoin much, much higher than it is historically. So what do I think is about to happen? Well, one of these days, Bitcoin is going to take off and shoot for the moon. And what will matter is how much Bitcoin you own before that happens. Now, it's never going to be a bad time to buy Bitcoin, but obviously you want to buy as much Bitcoin at $87,000 as you can, as compared to having to buy it at 187,000 or 287 or 387,000 or 1,087,000 or whatever price it is in the future. Some point, everybody, a critical mass of people are going to figure out that it makes more sense to own Bitcoin than the stock market or, treasury bonds or whatever it is people own today. And Bitcoin's going to start taking off pretty aggressively. As it takes off pretty aggressively, there's a bunch of people who buy things when they're going up. Now, that's typically not a great investment, philosophy. You tend to want to buy high value things when they're on sale, not when they're going up. But the nature of herds and the nature of people is people tend to buy things when they're going up and sell them when they're going down, even though that results in them typically making bad investment decisions. So when Bitcoin's fundamental value drives it higher with people like me buying it, eventually a bunch of other people, tourists and speculators, will pile on, and that will drive the price much, much, much higher. And again, eventually you're going to wish you had a whole lot more Bitcoin than you have right now, and you can buy it for 87,000 a coin, which is still ridiculously cheap compared to what I believe the long-term value of Bitcoin is. So as more people realize the stock market is not where they want to be, the stock market, according to ChatGPT, the U.S. stock market or the S&P 500 was valued at about $45 trillion. I'm assuming that's right. I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't have time to check it. But as money comes out of the stock market and out of U.S. Treasuries, which is massive, the massive amount of money in U.S. Treasuries, which is U.S. government debt, as that money comes out and a portion of that, even a small percentage of that goes into Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin goes up radically because Bitcoin is a much smaller asset class. So the total value of all the Bitcoin in the world is worth something like $1.7 trillion. So if the stock market drops by $1 trillion, obviously if all of that money went into Bitcoin, we'd be looking at, $1 million Bitcoin, because, when an asset class is only 1.7 trillion, there's just no way to buy $1 trillion of it without it going radically higher. But that's never what happens. Obviously, when people buy, sell stocks, they buy a lot of things. They buy bonds, they buy real estate, they buy precious metals, and which is why gold, the yellow rock, is on a, a radical upward tear right now. Now, obviously, Bitcoin has still radically outperformed gold, but gold right now has outperformed the entire U.S. stock market over the last 20 or 25 years, things like that. So you could have literally made more money by holding a yellow rock than you could have owning the U.S. stock market over whatever it is, the last 25 years or the last 20 years or whatever it is. So anyway, that's where we are right now. Bitcoin is doing exactly what Bitcoin is supposed to do. over time, Bitcoin will do what it's supposed to do a lot more, and it'll do weird, wonky stuff a lot less because a higher and higher percentage of people who own Bitcoin will be legit investors that understand what they own, and a smaller and smaller percentage of the Bitcoin will be owned by people with no strategy and no plan that just buy stuff when it goes up and sell it when it goes down and lose money for themselves in the process. And the less Bitcoin that's owned by people doing that, the better. And the more that Bitcoin is owned by people who understand what it is, how money works, and the value of storing your time and energy in something that the government cannot print out of thin air, that's just a big deal. Hold on, I'm in traffic here. So Bitcoin's doing exactly what it should do. I think in the near term here, we're going to get a huge rise in the value and price of Bitcoin. And again, I think it's a fantastic time to buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. And that includes in retirement accounts. You can put 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, pretty much any kind of retirement account can go in Bitcoin other than your current employer. Typically, your current employer, if you are still on your current 401k or 403b plan, typically your current employer will not allow you to put that in Bitcoin unless you take out a loan against your 401k. And I always recommend people do not borrow money. Just universally, I recommend people do not borrow money to buy Bitcoin or any other asset. Generally, it's just better not to borrow money. Now, borrowing your own money against the 401k, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that because obviously you're paying yourself back. So I don't have an opinion on that, but certainly you should not just borrow money in general to make investments because that's a great way to end up upside down and lose money. But if you've got an old 401k, an old IRA, a Roth IRA, well, a current IRA or a current Roth IRA, any of those can go in Bitcoin or a Bitcoin exchange traded fund like Fidelity FBTC. The ticker symbol on the stock market is F as in Fidelity, BTC as in Bitcoin, FBTC. So you can put any of those in Bitcoin, and I think it'll outperform anything else you could possibly put it in. So anyway, that's Bitcoin's doing what it should be doing. Things are in a great spot for the world of Bitcoin right now, and it is still on sale. It is still cheap, and you can still buy a whole lot of it for less US dollars than it's going to cost you at some point in the future. So, in my opinion, this is, act accordingly, although this is not financial advice, not legal advice, not tax advice, not accounting advice, just my personal opinion. Bitcoin is on sale. That's about to change. And if I were you, act accordingly because that's what I've already done. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.